Hi, my name is Marshall and this is Waveform. I'm not sure if you've noticed this lately, but a lot of first-person shooter games are starting to sound very similar. On their own, most of them sound incredible. The guns are punchy, the atmospheres are lush, and the dialogue's informative. But when you start comparing them to each other, they can lose some of their individuality. See if you can identify this extremely popular game just from the sound. What was your guess? It actually wasn't just one game. It was 3 games spliced together. But because the soundscapes are so similar, it's hard to tell when one ends and another starts. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of games out there that stand out and do their own thing, which is great. But there's one first-person shooter that you could never mistake for another.
It's high noon.
And that's Overwatch. The sound team at Blizzard hasn't just raised the bar with this game, they've reinvented the genre, and it seems like nobody's talking about it. Nobody makes videos about the amount of
information.
As much information as we can to the player.
Alright, well, nobody ever mentions the
Footsteps.
Okay, fine. You know what? If we're going to talk about the sound design in Overwatch, we got to start by taking it way back. In 2005, a visionary sound designer by the name of Walter Murch wrote an essay called Dense Clarity, Clear Density. At the heart of this essay was a very simple idea.
The human mind can focus on only so many things at one time.
And he's absolutely right. Walter Murch discovered that something very strange happens between the numbers 2 and 3. It's somewhere between 2 and 3 sounds that the human ear stops listening to individual things and begins to hear a group. Let me show you what that means. Listening to 2 people talk at the same time is difficult, but our brains can still pretty much handle it and pick up the basics of what both people are saying.
They tell me you are wicked, and I believe them, for I've seen your painted women under gas lamps luring the farm boys.
Now what if I had a third person?
But the other lesson of life is rarely mastered
I
the art of
turn once
fulfillment.
more to those who sneer.
Because science is easy, right? You know the rules, you write the code, you follow
them,
and you get the result.
At 3 people, you're forced to make a decision about who to focus on, and every time you shift focus, you can't help but miss everything the other 2 are saying. The same thing happens in games, but in a video game, it's much worse than that. There could be 40 sound effects playing at a time, not just 3. This really hits on the major difference between film sound and game sound, which is, in a movie, the video plays back at the same speed and the same rhythm every time. As sound designers, this lets us plan things out very easily. But in games, we just don't have that luxury. We can't control what the player does or what sounds are being triggered. So how does the game decide which 2 or 3 sounds you need to hear clearly? Let's get back to Overwatch. Now, Overwatch isn't the first game to solve this problem. Games have been using what's called dynamic mixing for years to reduce the clutter and the muddiness that happens when a million sounds play at the same time. It's one of the most essential parts of the game-making process, and not a lot of people even know it exists.
Yeah, it's one of those unsung, unnoticed heroes in the sound design world. And it's one of those things that needs to be completely invisible. If they ever notice the mix, then something got screwed up. What Blizzard did with Overwatch is the most smooth sounding thing in the universe. No one will ever notice that. It's so meticulous, but man, it's good.
Here's what's happening under the hood of a typical dynamic mix. A sound designer creates groups of sounds that appear in-game and ranks them by importance level. When the louder, more important sounds play, they lower the volume of the groups below them on the chain. So when you're walking around at the beginning of a game, you hear the ambience of the world around you and your footsteps, which are the low-volume sounds. But as soon as things get hectic, the low-volume sounds are effectively muted to make room for the more important stuff, like guns and dialogue. When you're playing a game, the volume level of everything is being changed on the fly to accommodate what you're doing. That's the dynamic part of dynamic mixing. But here's the thing, when the Overwatch team tried this, they ran into a problem.
So that's something we tried to use. It's a really great system, but it all runs on one fundamental rule, which is the loudest sound wins. So we were working with it, and everything was sounding good, but we were missing key gameplay information. Someone behind would walk up, and their footsteps would get drowned out, and you get a shotgun to the back of the head, and you're like, I never had a chance to respond to that. So we started thinking about how we could approach this problem a little bit differently.
They had to give players more useful sounds so they could react better to enemies. So instead of assigning importance based on volume, they had to do it based on something else.
In the end, it's values like what is the size of me on someone else's computer, essentially, that drives importance.
Threat level. In Overwatch, each enemy's volume is based on how much threat they pose to you at any given moment. This means that the footsteps of the guy aiming the shotgun at the back of your head are louder than the gunfire pointed in another direction. This is how Overwatch makes sure that you're hearing only what's important to you. This is their version of dense clarity, clear density. There's one more cool thing about Overwatch that I want to talk about, and that's team composition.
Your team composition and the enemy's team composition actually affects the soundscape in Overwatch, and I think that's so freaking cool. Now, that doesn't mean that things like Battlefield or Titanfall and stuff like that don't do a good job. They do. But it does sound kind of samey, regardless of what team you're on, regardless of who you're playing, what class. It sounds the same regardless.
Think about it this way. Not only can you identify Overwatch just by its soundscape, but you can also identify which characters are being played. That's the kind of originality and distinct characterization that I wish more games tried for. And one of the best ways to do it is with sound. This isn't about which game sounds the best or any sort of competition for individuality. It's about taking opportunities in sound design to separate your game from everything that's come before it. And there's no question that Overwatch has done that. Guys, this week I'll be picking 2 random subscribers to win one of 2 prizes. The first prize is an Audio-Technica AT2020 condenser microphone. I've used this exact microphone on countless voiceovers. It served me incredibly well. The second prize is the iZotope Ozone 7 plugin. If you guys are unfamiliar with the Ozone 7, it's an incredible all-in-one mastering plugin. I've mastered every song I've ever written with this tool. It's truly one of the best things out there. All you have to do is subscribe and comment to enter. You can enter for both or just one of the prizes, but you can't win both. Just comment hashtag iZotope to enter for the plugin and hashtag AT2020 for the mic. I'll be private messaging the winners and announcing them on Twitter in exactly 5 days. Good luck. I'll see you next time on Waveform.